Hey everyone, welcome to the Weekend Extra. I am Pastor Joe. This is Pastor Ryan. We just got done having a great conversation in our Right Now series about singleness, which is really kind of a nuclear bomb button depending upon who you're talking to and the angle that you're going. But Ryan, I thought it's a phenomenal conversation. If you missed it, go back and check it out. It's a really good baseline for this idea. But I actually had a chance afterward. My wheels were turning a little bit, Ryan, as you were teaching. And then I got a chance to talk with about a dozen people that are single after the service.
Oh, that's fun.
And besides hating you, no, I'm just kidding. But they had some really good questions. So we're going to dive into those today.
Great.
The first question that came up was, okay, so you're single and you've heard this vision that like, okay, I can invest my life into what God has for me. You talked about that in the 1 Corinthians 7 passage about here you are to give your life to the Lord. But what does that actually look like? What are ways that you can invest yourself truly and spiritually if you find yourself being single?
That's a great question. I think there's probably two major aspects that I think of right off the bat. One is I want to get to know how God's made me, right? Who He's wired me. So I think of our SHAPE class, which Pastor Joe teaches. It's a great commercial for that class, right? It's phenomenal. Where I learn all about my spiritual gifts, my heartbeat, my passions, my abilities, my personality. Is that right? I'm going to get it. In my experiences. Yeah. So I get to know all of this very specific stuff about how God's made me, how He's wired me, and maybe get closer to what He's called me to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a part of it where I want to just invest some time and energy into figuring out who am I, how has God wired me, and like what are the range of possibilities, especially long term. And then I think the next part is beginning just to respond to needs, just starting to say yes. Yeah. If there's a need, right, just start moving towards it. And I heard a teaching one time that, God can direct us when we're moving, right? It's hard to direct something that's standing still, but just like a ship, if we're in motion, if God can move us towards kind of His best for our lives. Yeah. And so I think that can show up in a gazillion ways. It can be serving in practical ways in our ministries here on the weekends. It can be down in the inner city. It can be mentoring kids, teaching them how to read, helping in all kinds of different avenues and formats. But there are needs all across ministries at Grace and other places. And I think it's just starting to say yes. Yeah. And then it can really grow from there as I learn where might I want to really land based on my gifts and my abilities.
I know as a young man, and I think back of some of the people that invested in my life the most, they weren't my dad. So for the men out there, for instance, just because you're not a dad doesn't mean you can't invest into people's lives. Totally. They need your example, they need your input, they need you to, and then especially in the scenarios where they're literally fatherless, they need healthy, godly men to insert themselves into their lives to see what that looks like. And so it's huge. It's huge. And then, of course, that applies to women as well. It's not a gender thing. It's just my experience. But yeah, so good. So good. Well, here's another question then, kind of like on the other side, because one side of singleness is how do you invest your life, but that's really called for all of us. But then the other side of singleness is you are thinking about maybe dating or marriage in the future, something like that. And one of the guys asked me, he says, I have a vision for my life. I want to get married someday. I would like that. I would like to have kids someday. But how do I prepare myself for that so that when the day comes, I'm as good of a fiance and then husband as I can be, as good of a father as I can be, but without dictating to God that this is your will for my life, because the two may not coincide. So how do you navigate that?
Right. How do I kind of set on that path even though I may not land there?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. I love what Kara said in her video, the challenge to become the kind of person that I would want to marry, right? And I think that ends up being a character thing. A phrase that we would use a lot when we were in the college ministry world is we want to be dateable, be marryable, be a marryable man or a marryable woman. And I want to be the kind of person that I would want to marry, right? A quality person. And I think that mostly has to do with character, right? Kind of growing in my trustworthiness, my integrity, my honesty. And that's what I love about her story is she just kind of set out to do that. She's like, I want to be a different kind of person.
Yeah.
And I think if we run down that road of character, you really can't lose.
Sure.
Right? If God brings somebody in your life, great. If He doesn't, that's another conversation to process that. But I'm becoming the kind of person that's at least available to find another person that maybe could make a match.
Would you recommend to somebody that they pursue a godly understanding of contentment in that area too.
Absolutely.
To not set themselves up for like emotional disappointment or whatever. Like,
yeah, I think this series helps that whole thing. Contentment's a big deal. I think it's great to learn about marriage, regardless if you're going to be married or not. Learning about dating, the concept of courting or engagement in that whole realm, and then into marriage, having a good understanding of what that process is like is a great thing. You know?
Yeah, because even if you're not married, like you have friends that are, you have family that is, and like if your friend comes to you with marriage questions, even if you're not married, you might be able to have some good insight if you've been preparing yourself in that character way, and now you can actually be a good friend as opposed to, I don't know.
Good luck.
Become single like me. Oh, no. Terrible advice. But that's great, Ryan. I appreciate you diving into this. And if you have more questions about this, like obviously there's great resources out there about like how to be single and godly and all that kind of stuff. And you can certainly reach out to any of us on the pastoral staff. But I hope you're digging into this series, because wherever you're at right now in life, we're trying to help you navigate that season of where Jesus has you now, but also looking ahead to where he's taking you into the future. So this has been the Weekend Extra. We'll catch you next week.